Welcome to True Story Recapped Movie Review Channel. Passengers, a 2016 sci-fi, romance, and drama picture, is my pick for today. You may observe the interstellar spaceship Avalon traveling through space on its way to the Homestead 2 colony world. The ship is on autopilot, and each of its quarters is vacant. Both the 258 crew members and the 5,000 passengers are in hibernation.
The ship quickly navigates through an asteroid belt, which weakens its shields. The ship's power is diverted to the main shield, but it is on a collision path with a massive asteroid. The asteroid collides with the spaceship unexpectedly, creating different faults. The spacecraft starts self-repair, but one of the hibernation pods awakes. Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer, is the awakened passenger. His pod opens, and an automatic mechanism assists him in waking up, informing him that he has spent 120 years in suspended animation and that the spacecraft is just 4 months from reaching Homestead. He is promised that he would be able to spend that time enjoying the ship's magnificent features. Prior to his arrival on the planet, Jim receives information concerning his ID band, his cabin, and the principal activities he will participate in. He gets ready, exits his cabin, and walks into an automated lesson made for a whole learning group, excited and scared to meet the folks aboard the ship. Jim seems concerned as the hologram describes the situation on Earth, calling it overcrowded, costly, and overdone. It tells him to save his questions till the conclusion of the session, but Jim keeps wondering why he's the only one there. He understands that the hologram cannot respond to him and goes in quest of other individuals. He arrives at the ship's main concourse. There is no one around either, but an automated informative desk gives the assistance. When Jim requests to speak with a real person, he is directed to a steward. However, when he discovers that there is no one there, he requests to speak with the captain. When he arrives at the bridge, he notices that none of the primary staff is awake, despite the fact that he does not have access to walk inside. He realized he awoke too soon and goes back to the concourse, where he sends a message to Earth wondering what he should do because he doesn't know how to return to hibernation. The communications system warns him that the pricey call to Earth will take 55 years to receive a response. Jim is heartbroken. He goes about and comes across the ship's bar, where he notices another guy. Something odd seems to be going on with him when he's chatting to the bartender. Jim knows he's an android as he tries to bring him a drink. It's known as Arthur. Jim wants to get more information from him, but he couldn't even explain to the robot how he can be there ahead of time. The next day, Jim wakes up in his cabin and walks to the cantina, where he immediately finds that most of the items on the menu are only available to gold-class passengers. He sips his ordinary coffee while attempting to repair his hibernation chamber. He manages to get it running after gathering all of the tools and lies down inside the pod. However, nothing happens. He then chooses to utilize the equipment he discovered to get access to the crew's sleep chambers. That also does not work. Small problems occur throughout the ship. Jim keeps going back to the pub, usually to chat with Arthur. The android provides him with some tips, which persuades him to break into one of the gold classrooms and enjoy a little fun on the ship. Jim tries each restaurant, game, and entertainment system. But as time passes, he grows increasingly frustrated with his loneliness. He gets drunk one day and wanders about the sleep pods until he comes into an airlock containing spacesuits prepared for spacewalks. Jim is dressed in a suit and proceeds to the airlock, where he presses a lever and then a button to unlock the airlock door. He's taken aback by the view as he steps outside the spacecraft. He is the only aware human being present at that point in time. Jim lets go of the magnets on his boots and float in space, distraught. He returns inside, removes the suit, and returns to the airlock without it. He pushes the lever, ready to end it all, but then changes his mind, hurries back inside, and slips on a bottle. Jim stands up and is immediately drawn to Aurora, a woman in one of the pods. He explores the directories for her files and listens to her passenger interview, becoming fascinated with her. He was later observed sitting next to her pod, still listening to her interviews. Back at the bar, he's reading several of her work and discussing them with Arthur. He gets preoccupied with the absurdity of his situation, traveling to another planet in search of a better life, awaking early and failing to arrive, and discovering his ideal lady only to find her out of reach. Jim continues to think about her and begins to consider waking her awake as well. He discusses it with the android, but he doesn't comprehend the problem. If he wakes her up for his own gain, he'll be leaving her there to die. He's on a ship. Jim first decides against it, but as time passes, he can't let it go. Until he changes his mind one day. He approaches her pod and successfully activates it. He hides and returns to his room when she awakens and goes through the same procedure he did. Later, he heads to the main concourse, hoping to locate her. And there she is, as perplexed as he was 1 year ago. Jim informs her that they are the only ones awake and drives her to the observatory. Then he informs her as he can't reach the crew or the ship's primary commands. Aurora panics and wishes to return to her pod. When they arrive, Jim informs her that there is not any special equipment aboard the spacecraft that can assist them in returning to hibernation, thus telling her that they are trapped. They return to the concourse, and he advises her to relax because she has just emerged from hibernation. She feels terrible for him because he has been alone on the ship for more than a year. Jim returns to the pub, feeling bad about what he did. He requests that Arthur not inform Aurora that he was the one who awakened her. Aurora awakens the next day. She returns to the concourse and inquires about the hibernation pods at the automated information desk. Jim joins her as well as they head out to breakfast. As they left, the information desk malfunctioned. Aurora notices in the cantina that Jim has just been eating the same breakfast for over a year and orders him one of the gold-class meals. They discuss the prospect of repairing the pods, but Aurora, unlike Jim, isn't ready to give up. She investigates the infirmary, then research materials, before arriving at the crew's hibernation rooms and attempting to smash the doors open. Jim discovers further flaws throughout the ship. Aurora regrets her existence on the Avalon some months later. She writes, jogs about the ship, and swims in the pool, becoming increasingly aware of her predicament. She continues to the cantina to interview Jim since she thinks his tale would be intriguing. She inquires as to why he came to the colony. Jim responds with business platitudes at first but then goes on to say that he thinks that in the new world, he can be somebody and make a life. Later, they arrive at the observatory, where Aurora finally realizes why she is there. She, unlike the other people on board, has a round-trip ticket. Her plan was to travel to Homestead 2, live for a year, and then return to Earth, becoming the first journalist to do so and write the greatest story ever told. Aurora gradually gives up on figuring out a solution to their current position, and Jim devises a strategy to cheer her up. He takes her dancing, to the movies, and to the basketball court. Finally, he takes her to the bar to meet Arthur. She unwinds for a moment before recalling their predicament. Jim is left alone with his robot, regretting what he's done to her. The next thing we know, he's working with something, and Aurora enters into the observatory to see a miniature of the Chrysler building he constructed for her. They go for a drink at the pub later on. They have dinner and tell each other details about their past. She explains that her dad died while she was an adolescent. After supper, Jim transports Aurora to the airlock, where they don their spacesuits. They embark on a spacewalk together. Jim now has somebody to share his amazing experience with. Jim turns off the magnets in their boots, and they float in space together. They rush back inside, kiss, go to his cabin, and sleep together. Soon after, they begin to live as a couple. Jim continues his exploration of the spacecraft and discovers the hydroponics bay. He gives flowers to Aurora. The ship approached a red giant one day, and they go to the observatory to observe it. Aurora's birthday is that night, so they celebrate in one of the various restaurants. On the ship, then to the bar. While Aurora is at the bar conversing with Arthur, Jim goes to the restroom to prepare the ring he made for her. The robot informs Aurora that Jim purposefully awakened her up, ignorant that he was supposed to keep it a secret. Jim reappears, and she confronts him in complete disbelief. She runs, enraged and terrified. When Jim returns to his cabin, he discovers that all of her belongings have vanished. The following day, he runs upon her at the cantina, but the instant he talks, she flees. She comes over to Jim's cabin one night, hitting and kicking him and threatening to murder him. Jim attempts to apologize and explains his behaviors to her through the comm because she continues to ignore him. He tells her he loves her, but Aurora seems unconcerned. Another failure occurs one night when Jim is at his cabin. When the spacecraft encounters a critical error, the primary command shuts down. Later, he enters the elevator, which malfunctions. Aurora enters the major concourse and notices Jim has planted a plant there. She then proceeds to the cantina, in which the meal dispensary is also broken. Suddenly, they both hear the deck chief's voice over the comms inquiring who placed the tree. They both dash onto the concourse, where they notice Gus Mancuso standing in front of Jim's tree. They identify themselves and explain the issue to the chief. He doesn't see how 3 pods could fail. Mancuso brings them to the bridge, where he determines that something is amiss with the spacecraft, but the data on the systems must be manually examined. When they are about to depart the bridge, a robot nearly falls on their heads, and the two of them explain. Mancuso reports that faults are becoming increasingly common across the ship. He assures them that this will not happen as he demonstrates how to acquire the data. Jim joins Mancuso as he checks on the pods. He's discovered what happened to Aurora's pod. The deck chief regards Jim's actions as heinous. Later, while examining the collected data on the bridge, Aurora joins him. They discuss what occurred with her pod, but he warns her he can't help her. Jim enters the room carrying the 16th broken robot. Mancuso feels sick from hibernating, so he goes to bed, but as he comes out, he spits up blood. Aurora can't sleep that night, so she goes swimming. Suddenly, there is a lack of gravity throughout the ship, and she begins to drown as the water from the pool moves with her. The gravity drive is reset, and she narrowly escapes alive. They collide on their way to find Mancuso. They're all back on the bridge, slowly figuring out what's going on with the ship. Mancuso discovers that something happened 2 years ago, destroying a critical system. They must determine and repair the source of the malfunction, as the entire aircraft is attempting to take up the slack. If they do not repair it, the entire ship will be stuck. He's dying, and there aren't any medicines that can halt it or extend his life. Afterward, the 3 of them join in the observatory, and Mancuso hands Jim his ID bracelet, instructs them to fix the ship, and then dies. The lights suddenly turn an ominous red, and the ship begins to shake. Jim informs Aurora that he requires her assistance, and they rush for engineering, but the gravity drive fails again. And then another one that affects Arthur as well. Jim turns him off. They eventually make it to engineering and start looking for the issue. They discover it in the power plant, and Aurora is drawn in as they open the hatch. Jim is drawn in as well, but he grabs onto the hatch as it closes in on him. He inevitably gets lured in as well, but they swiftly close the gap. They track the meteor's path and discover that it collided with the reactor control computer. Jim believes he can locate new components for it. They locate and replace the part, but the procedure of venting the plant continues to fail. They try again physically, but it fails. Jim realizes that he must open the venting door from the exterior of the spacecraft in order to cool the reactor. They both head to the airlock, and as he prepares to go, he hands Aurora Mancuso's bracelet to her because he may not return. She assists him with the outfit and tells him to return as he steps through the airlock. Because she is unable to survive on board the vessel without him. Aurora returns to the plant, where the heat has reached dangerous levels. A bolt from the power plant propels into her arm, as Jim approaches the vent from the reactor. It looks outside and notices the door. The temperature increases in the nuclear room as he attempts to open the vent door. He quickly understands that he must physically keep the door open so that the reactor can vent, and he informs Aurora of this. She opposes the proposal, but he begins to move with it and instructs her to evacuate the plant. She does not really want him to die, and they dispute, but he reminds her that they must rescue the other people, so she blows up the reactor. The technique is effective, but the reactor fumes force Jim away and destroy his bond. The compression in his outfit is also decreasing. He informs Aurora what occurred, and she rushes to find another outfit and brings him in. He informs Aurora what occurred, and she rushes to find another outfit and brings him in. He apologizes to her once more. She dresses up and goes out to get him, however, her tethering is too short. She's being dragged back, but she suddenly grabs his rope and pulls him in. Aurora takes Jim inside the hospital, only to discover that he is already dead. She uses Mancuso's wristband to bypass medical standards and revive him. The medical pod automatically performs the procedure and revives Jim. Aurora accepts his apology. Aurora later repairs Arthur, and they provide Mancuso a befitting space for burial. Aurora later repairs Arthur, and they provide Mancuso a befitting space for burial. He instructs her to enter the pod and spend the remainder of the voyage inside. But, as it is eventually revealed, she rejects and chose to remain awake on the ship with him. Jim eventually proposes to her, and they spend the remaining years of their lives on the vessel. The Avalon lands on Homestead 2, 88 years later. The crew awakens to discover the ship in an unexpected state. While the rest of the passengers were sleeping, Aurora left them a note in which she told them about her and Jim's existence aboard the ship.